We've also just been told by ACMI that the book is only on sale for another 15 minutes, unfortunately, if anyone wants to get a copy of the journey book tonight. But it will also be on sale at the after party.
It's available at the box office.
Yeah, at the box office, so where the tickets were made. But it's also on sale at the after party and on the Undergrowth website if you're interested. So yeah, there was a lot of interesting topics covered there, obviously, and I just want to say one thing before we move over to the panel, that I think that it's clear to me that there is, and from looking at the amount of interesting new research and ideas that are coming out, that definitely seem like it's taken quite a few decades for some of the more confronting aspects of this sort of cultural collision, which is perhaps the archaic traditions with the modern world as it's described there, to be able to become a little bit less threatening for mainstream society. And I like to think that perhaps events like this are an indication of the way in which perhaps we can begin to open up this dialogue a little bit more. And you know, so hopefully this is how it happens. You know, this is a way in which we can begin to discuss it. And I think that for a lot of people it's very difficult to actually open up these discussions with the larger general population or the mainstream media, and there's a lot of taboos which are around it. So it's very important and interesting to be able to actually look back at the historical dimensions of how plant sacraments have been used in entheogens, and then be able to use that in your own understanding of how you know, that is still continuing on to this day. So with that in mind, I think I'll pass over to Rak, who's going to introduce the speakers here tonight.
Yes, thank you. We have some esteemed guests here tonight. We have Martin Williams on my left, immediate left, who is the Vice President of Ethnogenesis Australia. Australis, sorry. Which is an organisation that's been around for a few years, which is all about promoting and understanding ethnogenic issues.
Thanks very much, Rak, and thanks for having me this evening. Yeah, I guess I'm wearing a couple of hats at the moment, but apart from having been involved with EGA for a few years now, and of course EGA will be known to a number of you, I hope, and for those who don't know of EGA, I hope they'll see something soon. We're an organisation that's recently incorporated, and we're therefore official now in the eyes of the world, to a certain degree anyway. But our interest really is to promote communication and a broader understanding of the issues, as Rak said, surrounding the use of entheogens throughout society, but certainly starting from a small base and building upwards. And I guess we'll cover a few of the, I hope to cover a fair few of the issues that face us in EGA in our discussion this evening. But also I'm actually a winemaker by profession, so I specialise in the production of legal intoxicants or legal entheogens. But in fact, I'm also studying medicinal chemistry, which is a branch of pharmacology and drug design. So at the moment that's more from a sort of a chemical, mechanistic sort of point of view, but of course sooner or later I expect to bring some of the other dimensions into my studies and what I can hope to contribute in the future as well.
Thank you, Martin. Tim, would you like to say a few words about your background and involvement with EGA?
Yeah, I think I was already mentioned in this. They said ageing hippies are around, and I think I'm sort of in some ways a resident ageing hippie here. When we started EGA, it was a wonderful experience for me because it was a cross-generational experience. I'm a child of the 60s and grew up with the Beatles and running off to India and doing all of those things. But I was very fortunate because my work as an agronomist has taken me right around the world. I've worked in 55 countries with lots of native peoples living in villages existing off what we can create with our hands. So I spent 20 years running around the tropics living with native peoples. And though a lot of the peoples that I was working with didn't have access to DMT or mescaline or anything like that, when you spent 5 months working with a family to produce 400 kilos of rice that's going to be their entire food for the year. I tell you, at the end of rice harvest, people get pretty high, just on rice. I was really inspired by EGA because the group of people that came out of the woodwork to come to our original ethnobotany conferences, which was held in Ringwood Library 7 years ago, and we had 15 people come, I think. I came across a cross-generational group of people whose minds absolutely delighted me. I started to see minds that were prepared to examine themselves. And perhaps like Carl Jung, as I got older, I started in some ways to get a bit more depressed about society because I see us just becoming deeper and deeper mired in materialism and selfishness. And I've spent 15 years working with native peoples out in the middle of nowhere who would give you half of what their worldly possessions are, quite happily if you needed them. And yet I've lived and grown up and brought my children up in a society which for me in some ways is a complete anathema to the way that I lived and want to live. And yet with the EGA group, I found a group of delightful young minds that were awake, that in some ways had gone into and gone through the drug experiences that I had over many decades, gone through them and started to look for the other side in a very short time. And I could feel, in some ways, some sense of growth of human consciousness starting to get compressed. I was trained as a biologist, but I've been fascinated by psychology. I received training in Gestalt psychotherapy, and I've been fascinated by brain neurochemistry and neurobiology for 20 years. And I've watched with interest with this, the way that humans have dealt with the concept of drugs. And it's really only in the last 10 years that biology has really started to help us understand what's going on. MRI imaging, PET scanning, and all sorts of other systems, labelling and so on, have allowed us to find out what's going on in the brain. We've discovered an area of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is responsible for repetitive, and I hesitate to use the word addictive behaviour because it's not there to be addictive. But what we've managed to do is find ways to make this area of the brain part of our addictions. And in our society at the moment, we have an absolute plethora of addictions that we're not even looking at. So we've got